Now we'll try a rectangle, but we'll try a special rectangle. We'll call this the golden rectangle, which is a very specific and prized geometric shape. This center line can be constructed right from the rectangle we drew above. There's the center in here. The center this way again would be the intersection of the diagonal to that center. So there is the center here. Just mark off our centers. Now the size of the rectangle that we'll make will be roughly 10 feet by 16 feet 2 inches, say. We're going to make it 8 feet 1 inch to the side, and this is 1/8 inch scale. So half of our rectangle will be 8 feet, and it'll be 10 foot. So it's as if you were drawing a 10-foot square, and from that square creating a golden rectangle. So again, we have our center, so we mark off the heights. 5 feet this way below the center, 5 feet above, that's 10 feet. We know that it's going to be 10 feet by 16, actually it'll be 16 feet 2 inches for the correct proportion, and that creates our 8 feet this way, 8 feet that way, and now there's the rectangle. But we shall start with a square, which is where the generation of the golden rectangle starts. So we'll strike our geometry here, which is to say top and bottom and left. That'll become the part of the square. To create the square is either a 45-degree diagonal or a compass where you bring down the vertical to the horizontal. So you could actually take a vertical here, strike your height there, bring that down to crosses the base, and that would be the mark of the rectangle. So the square would be, this point should line up with that point. And so since they are part of geometry, they do. So now we create a rectangle from that square. Now the way we do that again is we take half of that square and create another diagonal. So let's mark the center of this square, which is that point. It could be described by the intersection of the opposite diagonal, crossing at the center. This is the center. So this square is composed of these 4 squares. And now the diagonal of half of that square to its point and projected down will create the proportion for the golden rectangle. So we'll put our compass point right at the intersection here, the base of the center of the square, to the corner point, which is right there. We'll swing that arc down like that. So that arc down there will now construct the size of the rectangle that is in proportion to the square as the golden rectangle is, which actually turns out to be that 16 feet 2, which is here. So now we have a rectangle, and if you heavy up those lines, they'll look like this. So guidelines are good. You can always use guidelines to help you create your space. Your final lines will be darker, and therefore the construction lines only help to describe how you got to your shape. And it won't confuse the line. We'll heavy up our lines when we're done. But the nature of this, we now have a square and a rectangle. So there's the golden rectangle that's made up of this square and this rectangle. So the nature of a golden rectangle is it's self-replicating, so we can make a series of golden rectangles from that shape. And how we do that is we create a diagonal from that rectangle where we connect all the points, boom, like that. And that diagonal, where it crosses the square, will create another square and rectangle shape, such as the little square is in proportion to this rectangle as this square is in proportion to that rectangle. And that's that intersection right there. So let's create a square from that. We can check that by taking a 45 degree here, and that should hit that intersection also right there. So this 45 degree square hits that, and that will become our second golden rectangle. Right here like that. So if you heavy that up, you now have another generation of square and rectangle. Now the nature of this rectangle is it's similar to this rectangle. That's kind of the idea of proportion. So if we were to take the diagonal through this rectangle and intersect it like we did with our first rectangle, we would have a perpendicular. These diagonals are perpendicular. And this diagonal created a third point right here, which is a square and rectangle again, which is in proportion to this square and rectangle. We can check that again by doing the square as a 45 degree, for instance. So let's intersect this square at 45 degrees. Boom. And see if that intersection lines up with that intersection, which it should. And that would create the third square and rectangle. So now we have that to here. And you see what's happening is we're creating these